Hello everyone, welcome back to Altengrad City in City Skylines. We have a big project in front of us today, so let's just quickly mention the last build, which was the market square at the end of the very old bridge. We built some trams, did some nice detailing, and so on. Today we will continue from there. We will do some landscaping and we will build some remnants of old city walls, together with a big expansion of the city and its edge here. Let's go. So we have already built some of these walls in the past. If you remember, it's pretty much on the opposite edge of the city from this direction. So I really wanted to continue with these kinds of walls. I didn't want to put them only in one place of the city because they are just nice looking. They form a nice element in some of these city blocks. And in this particular area, I also wanted to use them to create the actual edge of the city. Now, in that previous part where we did those first city walls, I didn't really put them on the edge of the city because the city kind of grew past those walls, which kind of symbolized how the city is obviously much bigger than it used to be back when these walls completely surrounded the city. But that's obviously long in the past right now, and we only have these not exactly ruins, but just remnants of these city walls. Maybe they are even still maintained, so they don't exactly completely fall into ruin, but they are obviously not used anymore, and there are huge gaps in them, so they don't really have any significant function today. But they might serve as some kind of museums, especially in later decades when they are even older. But right now they might serve, the old buildings of like barracks and stuff might serve as some kind of warehouses, or I don't know, just some kind of even manufacturing places or something like that. But that's what we are going to do later. What I'm doing in here, and this is the main difference between these sets of walls that we're going to do today and the ones that we've built previously, these ones are going to go right to the river, as you can see. So these are the walls that were forming some very important defenses in here. I'm also going to do landscaping so that this place right by the river is going to be much lower. So there probably used to be some kind of a main entrance into the city. If you think about it, this is also the area where the old bridge is. Now, obviously, the really old medieval city walls were probably more inside of the city, and these much more recently constructed walls are just much in a greater area, right? Because the city was already much larger compared to the medieval times. But still, some of the connections into the city definitely remained from the medieval times. It just makes sense that those kinds of important roads between important cities pretty much stayed in their original geometry. So they were also coming through this area, and this kind of a bastion in here was overlooking that entrance into the city and probably even the traffic on the river or something like that. Obviously, the walls continued over the river on that little peninsula where we did some kind of city expansion recently. That's pretty much where the exhibition center is. Maybe where the exhibition center is today, that's where some of these walls just continued, right? That makes sense that these walls were probably, now we are in the 1930s, maybe some 100 years ago, were starting to be demolished. Maybe not even that, maybe like 70 or something like that. So it's not exactly like super ancient times, right, in terms of the city's expansion. Now, like I said, on that opposite end of the city, we built some city expansion past the walls. But in here, I'm not really going to do that. I don't really want to, because it would have to be just some kind of low density expansion, which I'm probably going to do here and there, but not really like a huge, high density expansion of the city. So these city walls are probably going to form still the edge, which probably didn't really change in a couple of decades in the past as well, right? Now, we are also going to do, well, now that I was talking about the city expansion past the walls, I am going to do a couple of blocks here on this bridge. Now, this bridge is something new. It might have been built just a couple of decades ago, or maybe even recently, and together with some of the expansion that we see here. So this is only like a single block of high density buildings that I'm going to put right here past the bridge. I'm just going to start doing like a harsh transition into the low density areas. I'm not really going to do any kind of transition. I'm just going to do a dividing line here on the bridge road, and past it is just going to be all low density, couple of blocks of the low density. This road that was perpendicular to the bridge that formed the intersection there, that's probably where the original medieval road entered the city. So it's a very, very old road. Obviously these days it's been paved, it's been asphalted, it's been made much wider so it can support all kinds of traffic. But along that road we are going to later put some more low density buildings, because that road probably saw some, settlements all over it because it's just too old, right? Now, this entrance, what I'm doing in here, when I was building this, I was taking some inspiration from real life, and I was looking at pictures of these bastions and like city walls and how it might have looked like. So I decided to do this bastion, so it's going to have that little gatehouse on the edge of it. And maybe this place that I'm building right here, it's slightly sunken, and maybe it used to be even lower, and there was just the river kind of creating a moat here, right? So the bridge was going over the river. So it was probably a very well-defended entrance into the city. But obviously the entrance is just super tiny. It's not really going to have enough capacity to provide any kind of cargo traffic going into the city. It was probably even having very low capacity back in the day when it was still working. But these days, people just decided, or not these days, but like I said, some decades ago when the walls were starting to be dismantled, they decided to just put the main road slightly somewhere else. And that's exactly this main road that is going pretty much straight through this entire one half of the city, right? It's the exact same road that goes past the government buildings on that fancy square that we did a couple of episodes back. It's a very, very important road. And it also goes, you can see it in this shot, goes into that market area by the old bridge, right? So this opening in the wall, that's where this new road is now going through, but it probably used to go through that gatehouse in that side of the bastion. So that's exactly why I decided to cut the walls right by the edge of this road. Now, as you could have seen, I did some landscaping because I really wanted to make it so that this half of the city is going to be, well, not really in a valley, but I guess in a valley. The valley that's formed by the river. It's a bit flat on this side of the river, but then some kind of ridges, continue. And that's pretty much what's going to be the edge of the city. That's what's going to be the edge of the city right here with these walls, right? But later, we are also going to do some more landscaping around this area to create those natural borders of the city, because I kind of want to limit the building space for myself, obviously, so I can have just some natural border past which I don't really, I can't even build some, big city expansion, but also just so it looks a bit more natural. I'm just not going to end this part of the city with some farm fields because I'm not really good with it, even though I will have to do that in some other parts of the city. So I guess I will have some training after all with that, but not in here. In here, we are just going to do the city walls on this hill, and that's going to serve as the city edge very, very nicely. So I finally decided that we are going to create some 2 more bastions here on this hill, and afterwards it's just going to be cut, and no other city walls are going to continue in any direction. I think that I've decided at this point that I'm not really going to do any other city walls anywhere else, and well, it's not like this is the last place where I could have done them, but anywhere else they wouldn't really make that much sense, because this is the edge of the city where they really made perfect sense, because there is that continuation between some of the places that I've built even previously, and this place just felt absolutely perfect for these kinds of walls. But anywhere else, I don't think so, because if you think about it, we also have that new terminus train station on this part of the city, on this side of the river, and these kinds of train stations were usually built around the times when the city walls were starting to be demolished. So, and for a good reason, because they wanted to make space for new infrastructure, especially the railways. So I suppose that the railways that we have been building for the past couple of episodes, those probably, were the reason why all these walls were cut down and just dismantled, and the material from these walls might have been even used for some embankments for the railway or these kinds of projects, right? So that's also the reason why the station, the terminus station in this part of the city is so tall compared to, for example, the water level in the river, and all the infrastructure just needs to go up towards it. And even the station itself is elevated compared to the street level right in front of it, right? So maybe that kind of embankment, even for the entire station, might have been actually filled with all the bricks and clay or whatever material these walls were filled with. That's what's been used for the construction of those kinds of railways, right? So it's all been nicely repurposed. But these kinds of walls, they could have easily stayed. They didn't really obstruct any expansion of the city, because the city just didn't expand at all through this direction. And in this time period, I'm not really sure if they would already be called like a historical landmark or something, or whether they were just seen as some kind of a nuisance, let's say, some kind of an obstacle, and they would have easily been just demolished if required. But obviously in like 2021, we already see these walls as some kind of a historical landmark, and I don't think that anyone would really touch them unless there was some kind of a huge project for infrastructure. But then again, today we can just easily put the infrastructure underground, like very deep underground, underneath all this, so doesn't really matter that much, and no one would probably destroy them. But back in these days, if they were in the way, they would probably just get rid of them, especially some even earlier decades than this. But not the case with these walls. These walls were just not in the way at all. Anyway, I was taking some inspiration from real life, especially for these buildings on the inner side of these walls, of these barracks buildings, or just military buildings, I suppose. So I recently downloaded, I think it's called the Charles Factory, this set of buildings. There's all kinds of different structures with this set, and I decided to do it with this style. So what I'm building is basically a line of buildings that are just lining the inside of these walls. Now, the buildings that are facing the regular wall, let's say, those I converted into PO and just cut them in half, basically, so that the roof is angled downwards towards the inside of the wall. And then where the bastion bay is, let's say, the space inside the bastion, the building there is just the normal version, which is wider, obviously. And I also painted it more brighter colors, so that there is some kind of a difference there. It's not that monotone. I was seeing this design with some of these fortresses in real life, so I decided to really also try it in here. And the height of these buildings is absolutely perfect. The textures, the colors, it just all fits. Even though these are industrial buildings, they just look absolutely fine. And I even decided to form some of these inside blocks with these buildings, even though these buildings already do have some like chimneys and places for cranes to load the cargo from the outside or something. I think it still can easily pass as some sort of a barracks buildings, because it's not like the chimneys are that disruptive. They would obviously have to have some kind of heating inside, so it's just fitting. It's just fitting to put them over here, and the fact that they are kind of monotone is playing in my favor, because it's supposed to be like old barracks. After all, military buildings are not exactly known for their like super interesting architecture, because they are supposed to be functional first and foremost. Now, that's obviously not going to be the only thing that I'm going to use for filling this entire place, because this area kind of marked by the walls and by this landscaping is pretty big. And I didn't really want to just cover it all with trees, because we still do have some opportunity to really play around with these very old Gothic and Renaissance and Baroque structures, right? This is, after all, pretty much the only place left in the city where we can do something like that. And I downloaded that new church from Titan. I already had it from a couple of episodes back, but this is probably a very good place for it. So I finally decided to not really put it inside some of the blocks of buildings, but I'm going to create it into some sort of a monastery at the base of this ridge. Now, obviously, the monastery is much older than the wall, so it's not like the monastery was built right past the military, part of the city. That's obviously not what probably would have happened back in the day, or maybe it would. I'm not exactly sure. But they are much older. It might be even the oldest part of this entire area, because it makes sense. The monastery might have easily been built outside the city, well outside the city, because maybe on this part of the river the city was just not built at all. There were no settlements back in the day, and maybe everything could have just started, in front of the monastery. So that's entirely possible. But at this point, I kind of left it behind because I wanted to get the rest of the wall area, sorted, because I wasn't exactly sure how big the monastery is supposed to be. If I should just add more buildings at the back of it, how's the landscaping going to look, and so on. So I decided to just continue with the barracks part of this area. And we have some detailing that needs to be finished. We have to provide some like open spaces, open areas, and all these kinds of things. So in this particular place, this is where the wall is going down on this hill. So I decided to do the wall as some of these steps. I didn't really want to use these walls like angled maybe with procedural objects. That wouldn't look exactly that right. And in here on this step up here, I just decided to put some kind of a dead-end road with some more of these barracks buildings and just some stairs connecting the different levels. We are later going to detail that cliffside or the face of that hill that's going down towards that main road. And we are just going to detail it with some rocks, make it kind of inaccessible. Maybe when they were building these kinds of walls, they did some changes to the rocks. Maybe they just excavated something, broke some rocks here and there. Probably, definitely did with the project of the new avenue, the new road, right? The new connecting road, because that wasn't there, and maybe some rocks were actually in the way. So that's also why I did some kind of retaining walls down on the side of that wall and things like that, right? Because at this time period, or even just a couple of decades ago, they clearly already had more than enough technology to be able to just do this kind of landscaping and changes to the environment to fit some kind of infrastructure, right? It was kind of the golden age for building all the infrastructure for the railways, doing all kinds of tunnels and embankments and trenches and stuff. So, for roads, it obviously would have been possible to do it as well. So interesting really to think about it this way with the infrastructure and how the changes might have changed really the entire, landscaping part of this area. But anyway, we are now going to go back into some detailing of the insides of these barracks areas. So first, I did some kind of detailing with these bastions, inside of the bastions. I also wanted to provide some more detailing with the barracks buildings, especially these kinds of walls that are connecting the buildings and the exact, the walls, basically. Because those were probably some kind of backyards. By the way, these buildings these days, for these kinds of fortresses, they obviously still stand, and not all of them are museums, because it probably would have been a bit too big for some kind of a museum. So some of these buildings are actually residential buildings these days. And these kinds of little backyards or pits behind the buildings, they are backyards, like proper backyards these days, for hanging clothes and stuff. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe in later decades, I'm going to revisit that and add some kind of detailing like it. Maybe even change colors on some of these buildings. Maybe they've been refurbished. The owners decided to bring some new colors into the area. So maybe that could be interesting. But right now I'm thinking that this area is mostly like a warehouse place, or partially abandoned, sure, but then what's not abandoned is probably some kind of industry. Warehouses probably maybe even some manufacturing, light manufacturing, but mostly warehouses. So I even added some of these new buildings. I even added some new warehouse buildings down on that bastion near the river, right in front of the walls, to kind of really symbolize that the walls just don't have the original purpose today anymore. So this is the hill detailing that I was talking about. At first I wanted to just put some trees here and be done with it, but then I wanted to do something slightly more interesting, so I decided to use these rocks. This is actually a very similar technique that I used in Aurelia, and even in that little project for the Norwegian island that I did some time ago, where I used a lot of these rocks because they are just great. I didn't really... Or did I convert them into procedural objects? I think I later did, because I wanted to repaint them. Right now they are standing out a bit too much. I really wanted to make them blend in with the textures, with the brown, like ruined texture of the map, because when I was doing this, I think I was doing this on the live stream, and I was kind of afraid that I probably overdid it a bit too much with the rocks. Maybe it's not exactly going to look that great, but as always with everything in City Skylines, when you start adding trees and decals, it's just everything's going to look much better, right? So not to worry, really. You're just going to use decals and trees, and everything is just going to look much better. It always does. It always does. So these are the retaining walls that I was talking about. Like I said, maybe some of these rocks, I intentionally used the kind of rocks with the flat faces down on the road, so it even looks like maybe some of these rocks were partially cut to make way for the road. And like I said in the beginning, maybe some of the material excavated or just obtained from the dismantling of the walls served as some kind of a filler material for some of these roads and, railroads, embankments, and all those kinds of things. So that's probably the case even for this main road, and that's probably the case even for filling that moat in front of the first bastion, and just some extensive, really, landscaping around this area. I also decided to turn that intersection into a four-way and make some kind of a road that's just going to twist up towards these walls. It's just going to be something more interesting to fill the area with, and there's also some kind of intersection there on the top. I'm probably going to later add some low-density buildings here and there, maybe some couple of villages here, a couple of settlements, really. On the intersections especially. This is me just starting with that already, just putting all kinds of these low density buildings in some of the empty areas and along the main roads, like I do exactly here. I'm not really going to detail these at all. I'm just going to put trees all around them. In some of those more important areas, sure, I will at least do like fences, or maybe some like trees and bushes in the backyards, but not really much more than that, because like I said many times before in the series, this kind of building is just for filling the places. So right by this intersection, yeah, sure, I will try to do some more detailing, some more careful detailing, let's say, but anywhere else, I'm not really going to bother. It's just something to see, from the cinematic shots from further away. Now, this railway was coming over that fairly recently built railway bridge that's going to the part of the city with the exhibition center, but then it's also going into that main train station. It's kind of going to loop around the city. So this is a kind of important train connection, and I really wanted to do something more interesting with it again. So I decided to put it into a tunnel. I did this nicely detailed entrance to the tunnel. I had to kind of detail some ugliness away, some kind of edges here, because I really wanted to use this custom tunnel entrance. I didn't really want to use the actual model of the tunnel entrance, so I had to do that, and some kind of retaining walls going asymmetrically from the entrance. It's kind of looking good, and obviously I did the same thing on the opposite end, which is kind of away from what we built today, so a bit invisible, but I think we are going to see that a bit more. There's also another tunnel entrance into the main train station, I think, on the opposite side of the city almost. So that's probably where I'm going to use a very similar technique. And these are all places that could easily change when we just go into the future, because more tracks are needed, or the tunnels just need more maintenance, or maybe just more optimal path for the tracks is going to be found, or something like that, right? So it's always a good idea to probably think about this in advance and maybe slightly plan it. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I kind of spent some time doing it in the time lapse, but didn't comment it at all. That's this little fort in front of the walls. Again, took some inspiration from real life. Really wanted to just create something more interesting with these walls, because that's an element that we haven't done in that area of the original city walls back then. So just a tiny little fort there, lots of open spaces in front of it, and just some trees here and there, especially lining the railway. Now we are finally going to go and take a look at this monastery. I'm going to put some kind of cemetery around it. I'm going to do these retaining walls, stairs, because it is on that slope, so it needs all these kinds of elements into it. Surfaces, obviously. Later I'm going to put some planters here and there, and just detail this place. Now, looking at the time lapse, looking at the timer, it's already been quite long, this episode, and I'm not really sure, but I probably built quite a lot of area. You are going to see that in the transition shot, right? Now, this place is still not done, though. I know that I said many times, even in the last episode, that this is kind of the last opportunity where we're going to do these kinds of buildings. Well, it's not, because this place is a bit tougher than I thought to fill. So we still have some empty blocks in front of this monastery, pretty much, just a couple of blocks really, to fill with these kinds of old buildings. It's mostly going to be some lower density buildings, because the high density is done. Yeah, you can clearly see that. And you can obviously see that also in here with the transition, that there are some blocks that, up there missing. But I think we are going to focus on that area on the top of this shot in some episode, in like one episode, where I would like to just do one project in that upper area, do some more landscaping, and kind of close the city in that part. It's not going to be the next episode. In the next episode, I would like to go pretty much to the direct opposite end of the city, where I would like to build another tram depot. And and by the way, I'm going to show you the new tram models that I downloaded for the city. You can also see them in the cinematics if you pay close attention in some of these shots. And right after that tram depot episode, we are going to go into a tram ride, because that's pretty much the reason why I wanted to do that another tram depot, because it's the last area that needs to be filled before I can do like a complete 100% complete ride through the city, at least on like one particular line that already has all the places around it completely done. I can already spoil a bit that it's going to be a very long line. It's going to go through the entire city. It's not really going to go through these areas, but it's going to be quite important anyway. Now, the cinematics. As you can see, this hillside turned out quite all right. It has the rocks that are more like blended to the surrounding terrain, so you can't exactly see them all that much. They are not really sticking out that much, but they're just a nice detail on this cliffside, and I really wanted to do something like that in there. The monastery is nicely divided from the rest of the area, also because I put some kind of really old medieval walls around it, much smaller walls, so there is that contrast between the medieval times of the city and some of the more recent times when all of those big walls used to be there. This kind of low shot is especially something I like, because it shows the elevation differences, right? How this place by the new bridge is very low compared to the walls. So if you are probably going into this part of the city on that new bridge, or from that new bridge, you will see those walls just towering over you on that hill, right? So that's just something nice. Anyway, guys, that is going to be all for today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you with the next episode. Take care and goodbye.